You're listening to Decision Wisconsin, the post-debate show.
I'm John Mercure. Thanks for hanging out with us. Adam Roberts from WTMJ is here as well. We're going to head right into the spin room where WTMJ's Wyatt Barmore-Pooley is. Looking at the feeds, Wyatt, on TV, it looks like it's getting really active in there. All right, we don't have Wyatt. Okay, we're going to try to get to Wyatt one more time. So H.A. Hutchinson is now in there. Former Vice President Mike Pence, we're told, is making his way in there. Vivek Ramaswamy is also in there. Dr. Ken Harris is going to join us coming up here in just a couple of minutes. So I thought one of the more interesting parts of the debate was the talk about Donald Trump. I mentioned this before the break. The moderator seemed really irritated about having to mention former President Trump, but they did. And the candidates really seemed to go at it when it came to that. All right, let's bring in Wyatt Barmore-Pooley here. He is with us in the spin room. Wyatt, it seems like it's getting a lot more busy in there.
Yeah, we've seen the appearance of several of the candidates, including former Vice President Mike Pence. Doug Burgum was here. Ron DeSantis was on the Sean Hannity show, which is directly in front of where they're taping that, right, where people are gathered at the fences to possibly talk to the candidates. DeSantis, after his appearance on Fox News, walked straight across, purposefully did not speak to anybody. And that is in contrast to former Vice President Pence and Doug Burgum, who came and talked directly to reporters. In addition to, now there are surrogates across the floor. Everywhere you go, somebody is being interviewed, and you can even hear the competing messages as I walk around the room of each candidate surrogates trying to say it was their win.
So is it a scrum setting, Wyatt? Can you try to get a question in with a candidate? Do you have to sneak in to do that? Is there a line? How's it work?
It is sort of a scrum situation. You basically get as close as you can, hold out the mic, and ask questions as you go. Senator Tim Scott, actually, right now, just sitting down on the Hannity show. And as that happens and as people move around, there continues to be just sort of a shift of the herd as people follow the candidates around the room.
I see Doug Burgum has now entered the room, and Ramaswamy is now coming off the set. Yep, Ramaswamy is now coming off the set. So when they come off that TV set, do they then become available to the general mass?
Yeah, that's what's been happening. Or they decide not to speak to the mass of reporters. It's really depended on the candidate. But yeah, that once they get off the set, they turn around and they're able to talk to us.
Right, Barmore-Pooley, hard work in the spin room tonight. Wyatt, thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Thanks, John. All
right, Dr. Ken Harris was in the debate hall. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, Dr. Ken Harris, as our Decision Wisconsin coverage continues on WTMJ. If you were at the debate, you can weigh in on what we're talking about. The text line is 855-616-1620, the Old National Bank talk and text line, Old National Bank, get old. Dr. Ken Harris, 1017 The Truth, is with us live in the studio. He was over at Fiserv. He is now back. Dr. Ken, you must have sprinted to get back here.
No, we walked great.
Well, you should have sprinted then.
Kyle Wallace was there along with me.
Well, he doesn't do anything fast. So.
Sherwin Hughes was there. He walks even slower.
Yeah, that's very true.
And so we had a pretty good time. Seat 150, 151, and 152. Smack dab in the middle, had a monitor in front of us, a loudspeaker, and we heard every single word. To the left was the spin room.
Yep.
So all of the networks were set up, and you could see Sean Hannity on Fox doing it live like we are now.
Yep.
And so it was interesting because once the debate started, people weren't paying attention. They were doing I'm going to type my initial comments and Bob, it's starting.
That's so interesting.
And when the first argument broke out, you could hear a pin drop.
Yeah.
Everybody went, whoa. Like, this is actually like
How
a couple
many people
minutes
roughly were in there?
Probably about 500, 600 people.
So what, as far as substance of the debate,
right?
What stood out at you from either a substance and comment point of view or superficial stuff like what you saw and how people behaved and how the candidates reacted? What were your impressions of what happened tonight?
If I had to go through each one, they pretty much played up to their percentage, I hate to say. with the exception of Donald Trump not being there, they played up to their percentage. I would put Nikki Haley above Ron DeSantis.
I agree with you.
Ron DeSantis is still like a cardboard guy.
Yep.
And once he talks, he's great, but he has like Scott Walker syndrome. Once he stops talking, it's like he disappears, and you don't know he's there. I
thought Nikki Haley had a very good night.
Well, Nikki Haley kind of. Somebody must have told Nikki Haley, when you go in, yes, I just want you to hit the ball. Don't try to hit a home run. Don't try to get to third base. Don't stretch out first base and slide into second. Just hit the ball. And that's exactly what she did. Multiple times she stepped up and she gave the experience of a woman who worked at the UN and the experience of a woman who was a governor who's worked with the federal government and has done things and experienced things. More importantly, has been there to make mistakes and correct them. And that's something that when she went after Vivek, it was
on Ukraine. I thought
gosh.
She hit a home run on going after him on Ukraine.
Nailed it. But I still think she damaged herself in that way only because she spoke to him the way boomers speak to millennials. And you could hear the crowd kind of when she started because now you're talking down to me.
But he doesn't even want millennials to be able to vote. So he's already got a strike against them.
He's got a strike. And some of his ideas are based on experience that he really didn't think through. You can see his you can see the people that surround him. It's almost like, hey, I want to buy a house. So you ask your friend who doesn't own a house how to buy a house. Right? And so you end up getting advice that really doesn't make any sense. And that's what we heard from him.
I just thought I thought that was a good way you put it. Everybody kind of played to where they were in the polls, right. Except I agree with you 100%. I think she was the one who maybe played above. And DeSantis just, I thought he was very disappointing at all. He came out, and at the very first time he opened his mouth was the best time. And the very first question he got, he said, we're going to send Biden to his basement. All right, that's a line. But he sounded strong and sounded interested. And from there, I thought it went downhill.
Because he said everything that you expected him to say. He didn't say anything new. He didn't go outside. And a couple of questions he didn't even answer. To the point where Martha McCallum, they were like, answer the question. You're not going to answer the question, so we'll take that as a yes.
And he didn't speak as much as some of the other candidates either.
No,
I thought he kind of lost interest. Like he disappeared. Yeah. Pence and Ramaswamy at least kept going. DeSantis
Grandpa
was
and grandson
gone. He was it
was hilarious.
I thought he was hilarious too.
Oh yeah.
I thought he didn't hurt himself tonight. Well, Chris Christie, did we get what we expected from Chris Christie?
Yeah, but I think Chris Christie would be a really good advisor and a really good vice president. I think he'd be great.
Especially in that pit bull role that the vice president typically plays on the trail.
Your job is to give the bad news. Your job is to travel and say, no, we're not going to do that. Yeah.
What topic interested you the most?
The topic that they should have jumped on, the topic that probably should have led it, education. Number 1, education. Number 2, abortion.
And they did spend a lot of time on abortion.
And they dropped the ball on both of them because everybody keeps talking about the same Republican talking points of the border. Like, dude, the border pretty much is a dead issue. The president's going to take care of it or they're not. And you're still it's like we have more pressing issues in cities around the country, and I think DeSantis mentioned it.
So I thought the abortion discussion was actually very interesting because they did distinguish themselves in some areas.
Yes.
Nikki Haley says, I'm unapologetically pro-life, but then she said, we need to stop demonizing this issue. We need to stop talking about arresting women. We need to stop talking about how there should be 0 abortions because that's not realistic.
Right.
And the other candidates didn't like that because, of course, they want to beat their chest and say, I'm pro-life from the second that a woman gets pregnant. Right. But she was more pragmatic and said, I am a woman up here, and I think that's unrealistic.
And then she jumped into 15 weeks.
Yes.
And I thought that was interesting because DeSantis was at 6 weeks.
Yes.
And
he didn't want to talk about it.
Right. And one of the things they talked about is when a baby's having pain is around 14, 15 weeks.
Yep, exactly.
So set it at 15.
But her and Pence on that issue kind of went at it because she said what I just said.
Yeah.
And then Pence was shaking his head the whole time. And then when he got to speak, he said, Nikki, you're my friend, But consensus is the enemy of leadership. We need to be strong on pro-life. We need to, and then he went into all the normal talking points, but a clear difference between those two candidates, at least on that issue.
Yes, but it's not his job to do that. It's the states, and the states will decide.
Yep.
And I thought it interesting. The thing that turned me off about Pence was the fact that he wanted the federal government to do everything. And I'm thinking to myself, that doesn't sound very conservative.
It doesn't.
That the fact that you want the government to come in and tell women what to do when you want it to, but then you don't want it to do when it's the Second Amendment. Okay, make up your mind which is which, all right?
Yep.
Because now you're talking out of both sides of your face.
So Governor Burgum, who's probably not going to be in the race very long, made that strong point on abortion. He said it should be states, not a federal issue. He said, we stand up here and say we want states to be able to make decisions,
and then we don't. And
now we're choosing. He made that exact point.
And I think he'd make a great vice president too. He was very, very clear about what he believed, and he didn't waver. He didn't have any missteps or anything, and I thought he did great.
See, I thought he had a rough night. He didn't get a lot of airtime, but like even the closing statement, I actually made a note here and underlined it. Stumbling around, doesn't seem very focused. I mean, he didn't make a big gaffe that hurt himself, but I was, to your point earlier, I think he kind of played to where he is in the polls.
Absolutely.
I think he's, a fringe candidate, standing on the far part of the stage, so close to the edge he's about to fall off the stage, and I think that's how he performed.
Except DeSantis. I'm wondering why he's there.
I'm completely with you. I was trying to figure out before the debate why DeSantis has slid. And after watching the debate tonight,
you know why?
It was bad.
I know Scott Walker. He's a decent guy, but it's like Scott Walker when he said he's going to get closer to the people, so he rolled up his sleeves. That's it. Like that's all. Like
that's what you got.
That's all you got.
Yeah,
and that's the same thing I saw with DeSantis.
Dr. Ken Harris is with us on Election Decision Wisconsin post-debate coverage. Here's what we're going to do. I know you were there, so I want to get your take on a couple specific issues. Animated discussion about climate change. We're going to talk about that. I'm going to play you a couple clips, and we will weigh in. We'll do that when our coverage continues up next on WTMJ. The debate in Milwaukee is in the books. I'm John Mercure, joined by my friend Dr. Ken Harris for 1017 The Truth, who was over there at Fiserv Forum. All right, Dr. Ken, I want to ask you about this fascinating exchange. The topic was climate change. This came about 25 minutes into the debate. I'm going to play you a couple clips, and then we'll have a discussion about this. This is Vivek Ramaswamy talking about what he thinks of climate change.
Let us be honest as Republicans. I'm the only person on the stage who isn't bought and paid for, so I can say this. The climate change agenda is a hoax. The climate change agenda is a hoax. And we have to declare independence for it. And the reality is, the anti-carbon agenda is the wet blanket on our economy.
Okay, so Chris Christie didn't like that answer.
And so the reality is, more people are dying of bad climate change policies than they are of actual climate change.
Governor Haley, are you bought and paid for?
Down by 98% in the last century.
Listen. Hold on.
I've had enough already tonight of a guy who sounds like ChatGPT standing up here. And the last person in one of these debates, Brett, who stood in the middle of the stage and said, "What's a skinny guy with an odd last name doing up here?" was Barack Obama, and I'm afraid we're dealing with the same type of amateur standing on stage tonight.
Come over and give me a hug. Give me a hug just like you did to Obama.
The same type of amateur.
And you'll help elect me just like you did to Obama, too. Give me that
the
bear
same
hug,
type of amateur.
So then the moderators even got in on it. So then Brett Baer, on this topic, asking each candidate, are you bought and paid for, Governor Haley? Are you bought and paid for, Senator Scott? And you could see Ramaswamy just with the big grin on his face. What did you think about this exchange and how it played into the bigger issue of how the debate went?
I have to unpack all that. We only have really?
We got as long as you want.
Part of the issue. He was so out of bounds with some of the ideas that he had. Vivek is like he's like a child who just learned what the internet was. And so everything he reads, he believes, right? And so now he's running around telling everybody, hey, did you know? But didn't really vet a lot of the things that he learned. He just parroted it. And so I think climate change, everybody recognizes that climate change basically is like a marketing ploy so we could put all this stuff underneath it, right? But in the end, you have to start to look at them, global warming and these types of things and melting ice caps and figure out who did what and is it man-made and all these things. He went to the extreme of basically discounting the entire thing.
But then he went even a step further, because you're right, he generalized there. But he said everybody on this stage is
bought and
paid for by the climate change industry, and they're puppets.
And I went, what? Like, where are you even getting your information from? Like, luckily I wasn't a moderator, because I would have asked, what's your source for that? And where'd you get it? And how do you support that? Because, unfortunately, you sound like an idiot.
Yeah, he sounded like as a matter of fact, Tim Scott said, you're childish.
Right.
You sound like a little child.
It's like you just learned something and you thought, that's cool. I agree with that. Let me run with it without really vetting it or thinking about it. But again, I believe you can tell if you look at his staff and look at their median age. And no disrespect, but if their median age is less than 40, you know exactly where that comes from. And it's not a negative. It's, again, I don't know if I said this on the air or not. It's like trying to buy a house with a friend who's never bought a house, but you're taking advice from them. Like at some point you're going to go, what? You don't know what you're talking about. And he didn't know what he was talking about.
He had a good week. He was headed the right direction. The video came out of him playing tennis with no shirt on. That came on the heels of him rapping to Eminem. So people thought, oh, that's interesting. And that kind of went viral. And then the debate came tonight, and the other candidates clearly went in knowing he had momentum and aiming to knock him down a little bit, and he just seemed ill-prepared.
Well, I think
smiling and smirking is not a response.
I think they call it showing your true colors. And so for him to make statements the way he made towards the end, and I know I'm jumping around, but some of the statements he made, and then he mentioned black and white, and like half the room went, but he's not black. Like what?
Right. That was weird. I wanted to ask you about that specifically. So what was your reaction to that?
I went, I remember looking over and saying, well, maybe people think he's black. Like, I don't know. Like what?
So then I expected him to at least say, or brown.
Right.
Because he's an Indian background. But to
Indian.
me, that seemed very odd.
Or Indian. Like you,
yes.
Dude, you actually skipped over yourself. Like, what are you doing? and it's almost as if he was just saying whatever's on the top of his mind. And I found it unfortunate because he had the ability, I believe, when it started, to overtake DeSantis. Easily. The only thing he needed to understand is, and here's how he would have killed everybody that went after him. He should have said, you're absolutely right. I don't have a lot of experience. That's what advisors are for.
Yep, I'll surround myself with the best people.
And it would have killed the entire argument. But he responded like a child.
Yeah.
I still say Tim Scott, non-starter. Nowhere to be found.
Yeah, he was really disappointing tonight, wasn't he?
Yeah.
I want to play you, when we come back from the break, one other thing that Ramaswamy had to say about Donald Trump. I'm going to play that for you after the break, and then I want to get your reaction. It is 10:50 on WTMJ. John Mercure and Dr. Ken Harris with you. Decision Wisconsin, post-debate coverage. We'll be right back. John Mercure and Dr. Ken Harris with you. Thanks for joining us, talking about the debate that took place tonight down at Fiserv Forum. Before we get into substance, I want to play you a soundbite here in a second. Where you were, did you get the chance to see the montage at the beginning
of
the whole thing?
Yes.
That was great for Milwaukee and Wisconsin. And the big voice guy said, well, actually, it wasn't that big a voice. I think it was maybe Britt Hume.
It was Britt. Yeah.
He said, in a place known for beer and cheese and gridiron and grit.
Yeah.
And they were showing shots of Milwaukee. When we talk about, I never really buy into the economic impact. We never know what that number means or how they arrive at it. But the branding and marketing for Milwaukee, this is a great example of why these things are important.
Yes, it is.
Weren't those beautiful pictures?
They were phenomenal, and I was upset because I've never seen those things from that angle, and I want to be on that boat or on that plane. That last shot when they were showing that lakefront, and I went, yep, that's why I moved here.
Our city looked great.
Yes, it did.
That is for sure. All right. I want to play this for you. So part of the debate tonight focused on former President Donald Trump, and the moderators seemed irritated to have to bring it up. You know, let's get to the elephant in the room. Okay, guess we have to. How are you not going to ask about this? I mean, they acted like they reluctantly had to ask about the topic that everybody's talking about, but that's an aside. This is Vivek Ramaswamy talking about Donald Trump. All the candidates were asked about if they would still support Donald Trump if he was convicted of a felony.
Right.
This is his response.
Let's just speak the truth, okay? President Trump, I believe, was the best president of the 21st century. It's a fact. And Chris Christie, honest to God, your claim that Donald Trump is motivated by vengeance and grievance would be a lot more credible if your entire campaign were not based on vengeance and grievance against one man. And if people at home want to see a bunch of people blindly bashing Donald Trump without an iota of vision for this country, they could just change the channel to MSNBC right now.
So my phone blew up after that comment. My Twitter did too, with things like hashtag what about Ronald Reagan? Hashtag what about the Reagan Revolution?
Right.
Are you really saying Donald Trump was the best, even if you narrow it down to just Republican presidents, that he was the best president of the 20th century?
Well,
21st century.
Well, first of all, Reagan wasn't president in the 21st century. So that cuts Reagan, Clinton, you know. There's a lot of people that were, I mean, it's only the last 20 years.
No, isn't it, am I thinking wrong? Isn't the 20th century the people that were...
21st century. He said the 21st century. So that only counts, 2000, 2001. So really, we've only had, 3? 4? No, 3.
So I think a lot of Republicans would argue that, I mean, you know, we can have this debate, but...
It's easy to say he would be the best in the 21st century because he's one of how many?
Yeah. What about George W. Bush?
Right, George W. Bush. That's it. I would say George W. Bush overall, because of 9/11, was a better president.
I would agree. And we never got attacked on our soil again since then, which was his number one thing he needed to take care of.
Correct.
But this gets to a broader point. Is he too much? Does he try too hard to grab the headline, to fire the shot, to be so aggressive and so assertive that he loses credibility on some issues, and not just on this quote, but in general?
I think he's trying to be what he thinks the people want him to be instead of just being himself. I think people will be fine if you're authentic. Even with all your faults and all your warts. I mean, think about what Donald Trump did. With all his faults, with all his warts, the Catholic Church won't support him, Christians won't support him, he's been divorced, all this stuff, he still won because he was authentic and you knew exactly who you were getting, right? You were getting the narcissistic, outspoken, but if he had your back, he was there 120%. All those positives and negatives you knew up front, and then you could say yes or no. With him, it's almost like he's an appeaser, right? Well, let me say what they think they'll say, and then I'll get up. And it's not going to work that way. People see through that.
Especially when you're on a stage with people who are trying to beat your head in. They're going to call you on it. They're going to bring... You can do a viral video and say whatever you want, but when you're on a stage debating with people fighting for their life, you're going to get called on that. Who can defend
themselves.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because they're standing right next to you.
Yeah.
What do you think about his idea that anyone under the age of 25 should have to pass a citizenship-style test before they're allowed to vote?
I remember being in school as a baby boomer, of which I don't think you are. And so we had to take civics, and there was a test we had to take in high school to pass. So I have no problem with it. The issue I have is a couple things, right? If you're going to teach history accurately. That guy that we keep talking about called Columbus did not discover America when Spaniards were here 200 years before he got here. Details, right? He got lost and went down to the Bahamas. Things like that. The impact that African Americans had on the country, Native Asians that helped build this country, I think those things should be included with everything else. The things that Florida did and now Arkansas with getting rid of African American AP history is just kind of weird.
Why?
And now they're starting to confiscate books? Like, huh?
Yeah.
Like it's weird. When I was growing up, Democrats were the ones for free speech, you can say everything. Now they're against it. Republicans have become fascists. I'm like, is this actually America?
Like, where's this coming from?
Like, where is all this coming from? And I think that shows that divide that we have.
Yeah.
And we have to do something to fix it. But I don't know if this election will do it. I thought Vivek might have been the person at the age he was to fill that gap, but now it's no.
There's a lot of questions there.
Oh, yeah.
Dr. Ken was over there at the debate.
Where everything exciting happened.
Was it what you thought it would be? Did anything surprise you? What was it like being over there?
It was actually better than I thought. I thought it was going to be a stoic, everybody sitting around, listening intently, and they say all their barbs, and then we're done. But it got, I'm thankful for it. Brett and Martha lost control a couple times.
They did. Nikki Haley at one point said, even kind of mumbled it, but she said, you guys need to get this under control, looking at them.
And I think it showed the character of the participants, those that remained quiet and those who argued. One of the things is the youngest and the oldest person there were the two people doing the most arguing. And I thought that was
That's true. I hadn't thought about that.
That Mike Pence and Vivek were just going back and forth, and I'm thinking to myself, yeah, I think I'm going to pick one of the other people like Nikki Haley or Tim Scott who were just neutral. Said, I'm not getting in that. And that shows, in that instance, I disagree with what Mike Pence said about leadership and all that stuff. That showed leadership, that knowing when to hold them, when to fold them, when to walk away, when to run.
But
and
you know why they do it?
it?
Because the last guy that did that got elected president.
Yes, they did.
I mean, he was the master at just interrupting, bullying, bullying the other candidates, bullying the moderators.
But
the
the difference was
voice
he had
in the
something
room.
to say. Like when he interrupted, he made a point. He just interrupted, like Vivek just interrupted to.
Sometimes he said a lot of crazy stuff too.
Of course he did. But he got the headline the next day.
And the problem is, like, when Trump interrupts, he owns it, and you can hear him.
Right.
Half the time when Vivek interrupted, it was kind of mumbly.
It was like this mousy.
What's he saying?
Like
he's
what?
just irritating, but he's not saying anything.
Everybody be quiet so he can finish, so he can stop talking.
Yeah.
Because it was just irritating.
And then Pence surprised me, to be honest with you, because he seems like an orderly.
Unflappable.
And he seems like he's going to follow. He seems like a rule follower, like the ultimate rule follower. But he was he wouldn't be quiet either.
But that's what scares me when we think about it, because you have a person who doesn't know when to break the rules, doesn't know when to draw outside the line. It kind of reminds me of the, I don't know if it's the Rorschach or the test they give you with the 9 dots, and they say connect all the dots, but don't lift your pen up off the paper, and you don't know how to draw outside the line, so you never quite finish. And that's what Mike Pence reminded me of. Like, if it got to where you had to make an independent decision and there was no rule, could you do that? And I don't know.
Good question.
And I just don't know.
Good question. Let's play a Mike Pence bite, because part of what they discussed was, did Mike Pence do the right thing on January 6th when he certified the election and said no to Donald Trump's pressure? And so they all weighed in on this. I'm going to play this bite from Mike Pence. The candidates, to a T, said he did the right thing, some kind of reluctantly and not very enthusiastically. This is Mike Pence answering that question, and then Ron DeSantis weighs in.
What do you think, Vice President? Is to support and defend the Constitution of the United States. I think the American people deserve to know whether everyone on this stage agrees that I kept my oath to the Constitution that day. There's no more important duty. So answer the question.
I've answered this before. So yes. Why are we? Mike did his duty. I got no beef with him. But here's the thing: is this what we're going to be focusing on?
I'm relieved.
Going forward, the rehashing of this. I'll tell you, the Democrats would love that, and they will win if we let him get away with it.
So that was Pence at the beginning, DeSantis almost reluctantly saying, he did his duty, I got no problem with that. Then this is Chris Christie, who looked very irritated at the other candidates who were reluctant to give Pence credit.
Mike Pence stood for the Constitution, and he deserves not grudging credit. He deserves our thanks as Americans for putting his oath of office and the Constitution of the United States before personal, political, and unfair pressure. And the argument that we need to have in this party before we can move on to the issues that Ron talked about is we have to dispense with the person who said that we need to suspend the Constitution to put forward his political career. Mike Pence said no, and he deserves credit for it.
I don't think that Chris Christie was surprising. You know, we all knew that he was going to come out and this would be his tone and tactic. I did think that it was effective, and
yes, it was.
I think it was brave because everybody else up there is reluctant to criticize Donald Trump, and Chris Christie he got booed. He got booed repeatedly when he talked about Donald Trump, and he argued with Vivek about Donald Trump, who we told you earlier believes that Trump was one of the greatest presidents ever. Christie's saying, I'm not going to bow to anyone who disrespects the Constitution. Donald Trump said it's okay to suspend the Constitution. That's not okay with me. He's got a tough path ahead because Donald Trump has 50% of the vote in all the polling.
Correct.
But Chris Christie stands for what he stands for. What were your impressions of Chris Christie this evening?
I think, as I said earlier, I think Chris Christie would make a great vice president. He is a former U.S. attorney. And I believe he's quoted as saying he was a U.S. attorney in the 5th largest district in America. And so he knows how to handle himself. He knows how to speak. I think the issue with Chris Christie is this idea people have in their head of a president. He doesn't fit it. And that's unfortunate because I think he'd probably make a great president. He has the knowledge, the intellect, and he understands the Defense Department. He understands the Justice Department. And so that's one of the places you really should be able to understand. And so I think he did great. I think that held him steady. Might have inched up a few points with that. If I had to put everybody in order, I would have to put Nikki Haley and then Chris Christie. I think Ron DeSantis came in third behind maybe third with Tim Scott, and that's about it. And Tim only got it because he's got the name recognition, and unfortunately, he's the only black guy there. Yeah. Just like Nikki Haley being the only woman.
I would put Pence third, but I would say I would. I think DeSantis was bad. I think he maybe fifth. I was not impressed with DeSantis. Yeah. Pence had good moments and bad moments. DeSantis just didn't have moments. It was just like, where was he?
I think that group of people would be better without DeSantis. Honestly.
Yeah.
Because then other people would be able to step up and you'd be able to spread around some of that, 14, 15%?
Yeah. Wyatt Barmore-Pooley joins us here live in the WTMJ studio. He was over in the spin room watching these pictures, Wyatt, on TV of the spin room. My goodness. It looked like there were people everywhere.
Everywhere, yes.
Yeah, it was really something. I've never been in a spin room before, and that was a real doozy for my first time. But I did actually, once I stepped away from the spin room, I was able to speak with Donald Trump Jr., who was in the room in person. He was actually not allowed in the spin room. You got to have the fancy pass like I did to be able to go there. He was in the media filing room, and so when I walked over to regroup, he was there. I was able to ask him a question about Wisconsin voters. He was talking mainly about his grievances with Fox News, but he also gave his analysis of the debate. He thought Vivek was the winner.
You did talk to two people who were on the stage, right?
I did.
So one was Asa Hutchinson. How did he feel he did? I know what you're going to say. He thought he did great. What did he have to say about his performance?
I was not able to speak all that much with, or listen and hear as well, all that much from Governor Hutchinson. Doug Burgum was the one who had a more interesting connection to Wisconsin. He actually got looked at by the Bucs team doctor today, is what he said, because of his Achilles injury. So he breaking news, he full tore it. He fully tore the Achilles. He said that when he was thinking about going up on the stage, whether he was going to go, because he came into the spin room earlier this afternoon on crutches, whether he was going to be able to play in the game, as it were. He said he was inspired by military and law enforcement. And basically, if they can do that, this should be easy for me.
Well, no painkillers. He stood all that time. I do give him credit for that.
He was still standing.
That's about all he gets credit for, though, because he was terrible tonight.
He was still standing. Even an hour after the debate, no crutches, in the boot, in the spin room. He was one of two candidates on the floor that long, him and Hutchinson. And at that point, there was no sign of any of the others. Actually, that's not true. I saw Mike Pence on Fox News. They were raised above the on the big stage, so it was kind of fun to see who was cycling through, and that was it was the best tell for who was going to possibly be available for the.
Did either
the
of those
masses.
two guys that were on the stage and you were talking to have any evaluation about how the night went for them?
I think Hutchinson was more positive, and Burgum was talking more about different things. They continued to focus on the points that they were bringing up in the debate itself. There was a lot of repetition in what they were saying. Definitely the continuing to hammer the points that they wanted to hit. Burgum did say he found the Chris Christie let's deport them all plan. He said he found that logistically basically next to impossible, I believe.
Which it is. Maybe Burgum probably wanted to just know where he could get a scotch and get off his feet.
Well, I saw several places on the walk back from Fiserv Forum where he could have, but actually a couple of them were rented out, like the 3rd Street Market Hall.
Wyatt Barmore-Pooley in the spin room tonight. Good job over there. Thank you, Wyatt.
Thanks,
it
John.
is
Dr.
11:12 at WTMJ. We're going to take one more break. When we come back, a little more audio for you. And who was the biggest winner? Who was the biggest disappointment? This is Decision Wisconsin, post-debate coverage on WTMJ. What a night for Milwaukee. A lot of sniping going on, especially in the first two-thirds of the debate. I want to play this cut for you. This is Chris Christie and Vivek Ramaswamy arguing over qualifications to be president.
You sit here talking about how you want to stand up for the rule of law.
Yes.
And law and order. And the fact is that it can't be selective. In your book, you had much different things to say about Donald Trump than you're saying here tonight.
That's not true.
Well, it is very true.
That is not true.
It's very true. I read it,
Because
and
there's
I know.
a difference between bad behavior and illegal behavior, Chris. And you as a prosecutor should know better.
Yeah, you know what? I know a lot better.
There's a difference between bad behavior. And
I know a lot better than you do. You've never done it like you've never done anything to try to advance the interests of this government except to put yourself forward as a candidate tonight. And here's the thing. We've stood up for law and order. I did it as U.S. attorney. I did it as governor. And I am not going to bow to anyone when we have a president of the United States who disrespects the Constitution.
What'd you think of those comments? I thought they were strong.
Yes, very, very
pointed.
Strong.
I thought
yes.
He was irritated. It was almost like a dad chastising his child who just tried to tell him a big lie and got caught.
That's true. I think that Vivek will need to either reestablish himself or figure out who he's going to give his money to, because he's. I think you can stick a fork in him. Somebody said earlier, Haley was a TKO. Nah, she knocked him out.
Flat out knocked him
Flat out. And when he fell, he bumped his head. he won't be back. No.
I want to talk about the moderators with you. So, not an easy job. It's a tough job, but you sign up for the job.
Yeah.
So the moderators were Brett Baer and Martha McCallum from Fox. Mm-hmm. I'll stipulate to the fact that it was on Fox News. They have a definite perspective, but I expected more from them in 2 points, in 2 ways. First off, I thought they didn't have control.
No,
they did
none at
not
all.
have
None
control, right? I mean, Nikki Haley, as alluding to it frustratingly in the middle of the debate, saying, you guys have to get control, just kind of putting her hands up in the air. And they did. They didn't even have control over each other. They seemed to not know who was supposed to talk, what page they were on literally in their big binder. They were interrupting each other. At one point, Martha McCallum trying to say to one of the candidates, that's enough, we're going to the next person. At the same time, Brett Baer was saying, go ahead,
right.
You have 30 seconds.
Right. At the same time, we're supposed to go to somebody different.
Right.
And then they kept acquiescing and letting and I'm like, no, like take control of what's going on. Take control of this. When people are talking, hold your hand up, stop talking, something. cut their microphones off, for goodness sake.
Something.
But something had to be done, even if it was an air horn. Something needed to quiet them down.
The other thing I didn't like was I really liked at the beginning when they showed the great shots of Milwaukee and they said nice things about our city, which looked fantastic. The race for the White House takes flight from Milwaukee, the voice guy said. That sounded really good. But then big applause. They introduced the moderators. The biggest applause for Burgum, probably because, they couldn't believe that he was standing there on the stage. And then even before the first question was asked, the two moderators attacked Joe Biden.
Right.
Which I guess shouldn't be a surprise. It's Fox News, but I was disappointed because it's a presidential debate.
And you say you're a journalist.
Right.
You should be unbiased.
And, taking shots at Bidenomics and the way they said Bidenomics. Is it working for America? And I just didn't appreciate that. And then throughout the debate, I'm going to play devil's advocate with every single candidate if I'm moderating the debate.
Correct.
And they didn't do that as much as they took shots at Joe Biden.
Right.
And I just don't think that's the role of the candidate, not the moderator.
That is correct.
They don't need help.
Right.
The candidates don't need help.
And it's almost as if they were priming the pump so that they would answer in a certain way.
Right.
And it was just so unfortunate because there were no open-ended questions. There was nothing for anybody to expound on. And if the rule is if they say your name, you get to respond. If I refer to somebody younger, you don't get to respond because they didn't say your name. Like even the moderators didn't follow the rules.
Right,
I'm like, okay, this is a free-for-all. They're
inconsistent.
Yeah, completely. The talking in the room, the going back and forth and all that. And so somebody asked on the talk and text line, what is the spin room? The spin room is where all of the media who were going to do actual live interviews. And so I was in the filing room where we were able to post on social media and do live things. But the spin room was the place where everybody got to tell their side. Everybody got to talk about their way. It was almost as if you had like the RNC Milwaukee debate 2.0, where you were able to go and expound on what you talked about during the debate.
Yeah, I've been in the spin room twice.
Yeah.
One at a presidential debate, one at a vice presidential debate, and Wyatt described it perfectly. It is unbelievable energy.
Yes.
It's chaos. It's people literally bumping into each other. It is very interesting. So on the text line, people are writing in saying, we're focusing too much on the makeup of Ramaswamy and not the substance.
Right.
I don't agree. We're talking about both, and the substance was lacking. All right, here's what we're going to do. We're going to take one more break. When we come back, I'm going to play something for you which got kind of laughs at the debate. It was a very interesting moment, and we'll recap exactly what happened at Fiserv Forum and what happens next. And by the way, before we do that, candidate speaking times are just being released. Mike Pence spoke for 12 minutes and 26 seconds. Ramaswamy, 11:38. Chris Christie, 11:37. So they were within a second of each other. DeSantis spoke for 10 minutes. Nikki Haley, 8:20. Tim Scott, 7:57. Doug Burgum, 7:50. Asa Hutchinson, 7:24. So Mike Pence spoke for one more minute than anybody else. And then a couple of candidates were right below that. So no real surprise there. We'll be right back. This is Decision Wisconsin on WTMJ. Recapping the debate that took place tonight in Milwaukee. They were united in attacking President Biden, but there was also plenty of attacking each other, which I guess they have to do. Ron DeSantis didn't really get attacked very much, but he didn't need to because
he wasn't there.
He wasn't there. He just was kind of someone on the text line, Laura in Las Vegas, actually. John, you're wrong. DeSantis had a good debate performance. Nikki and Ron were the winners. DeSantis did have a good debate performance if you eliminate the other 7 people that were on the stage. He was literally, of the 8 people on the stage, like the 5th or 6th best at the most.
Right.
The other problem I had with Tim Scott was that he also just didn't seem there. And the statistics just being released on how much time each person spoke talking, the moderators direct questions to certain people, but then you also have to jump in and control your own message.
That is true.
And some of them just didn't. Some of them just seemed happy to be standing there, really. All right, an interesting moment took place late in the debate. So they do what they call a lightning round. So in the lightning round, Each candidate has 30 seconds to answer the question instead of 60 seconds. They asked some questions like, should older presidents have to take a mental acuity test to serve? To talk about the role of China. Should presidents have to discuss their faith? I thought this one was interesting. Should there be mandatory military service? That was Ron DeSantis. He said, I think there's value in serving, but no, it should be voluntary. And then Chris Christie. I think he got the last question, actually. I think it was the last question.
Yeah, I believe so.
In the lightning round, he was asked about the American people and UFOs. I know, this really happened.
Governor Christie, do you believe that the recent spike...
Get the UFO question?
Yeah, you do.
Come on, man.
No, but Governor Christie, would you level with the American people about what the government knows about these possible
Look,
encounters?
Martha, and especially coming from a woman from New Jersey, I think it's horrible that just because I'm from New Jersey, you asked me about unidentified flying objects and Martians. We're different, but we're not that different. Of course, the job of the President of the United States is to level with the American people about everything.
Now, here's the funny part about that. Every person that was president that said they were going to say something about it as far back as Jimmy Carter, when they got in office, it disappeared. Every single one.
Donald Trump famously said that he would address this and look at it, and
he
did
didn't.
not.
Obama said it. Oh, I'm going to address it. And didn't do it. So there has to be something there. and I'm being a complete and total conspiracy theorist. That there has to be something there that is significant enough to literally change the way Americans or people in the world look at religion, look at creation, look at the world. Something's there. So I think he's probably short of Eisenhower. Every single president has told that same lie, and every single person has not talked about it.
All right, let's quickly, before we get out of here.
UFOs.
We only got 2 minutes. Run through for me. There were 8 candidates.
Yes.
Rank them for me. How you think they did from 1 to 8. Do you have the names all in front of you?
I don't have the names all in front of me. But
all right,
I
well,
can
give me the
tell
first
you.
couple. Who do you think did well and who hurt themselves?
Number 1, Nikki Haley. I'd have to put Chris Christie. Number 2. I'm torn about Vivek being number 3. So we're going to drop him to number 4. Ron DeSantis, number 3. Vivek, number 4. And then the worst one actually was, what's his name from North Dakota? Burgum.
Yeah, I'm very similar. So I think Nikki Haley had the best night.
Yeah.
I would say she had the best night and helped herself the most. I'd
She
put her
clearly
1.
had the biggest stick.
She did, and she swung that
And
thing,
she
too.
swung it.
Chris Christie, I think there was the fear, if you're a Christie supporter, he could go too far. He could be too aggressive. I think he had a good night. He defended the Constitution. He defended himself. He was the only guy willing to really take it to Trump. I would put Christie 2. I'd put Mike Pence 3. I think Mike Pence had a solid night. I think he did what he had to. I'd put Vivek 4th. And coming in, I was thinking he might be 1st or 2nd with his momentum, the way things are going. But I'd put him at 4th and DeSantis 5th. And I only put DeSantis 5th because the last 3 were just terrible.
Just being nice.
Yeah, because he was not good tonight.
All right.
Then I think Burgum was at the bottom with Hutchinson and Scott kind of rounded. I had high expectations for Hutchinson.
And Scott.
I mean, not Hutchinson, excuse me. I meant Scott.
Yeah.
And it just didn't materialize.
Nope. But it's only the first one.
And the other one is just in a month away. So they said they're going to change the criteria and haven't outlined it yet, but I think they'd like less people on stage. And that's 1 month from now at the Reagan Library. So we will see what happens 1 month from now. And we'll be back here with you to let you know how that all plays out. That's going to wrap it up. GOP candidates here in Milwaukee, the first debate underway, a nice precursor for the Republican National Convention, which will take place here next year. So this is a really nice warm-up. Join Dr. Ken Harris tomorrow for a recap. You're going to get some good action tomorrow on your show. Thanks for being with us, Dr. Ken.
Thank you much.
I'm John Mercure. Enjoy the rest of your night.